beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of WTF What's the Frequency? The show where we aim to impart knowledge and advice on how you can engage with the frequencies of the universe, the frequencies of the earth, to get exactly what you have a taste for, what you truly desire in your life, and to really illuminate to you that it doesn't matter where you are right now, the sky really is the limit. So this week, I've got a very exciting guest to talk to. I've got Dr. Dolores Fazzino. She is a medical intuitive. What on earth does that mean? Not only is she a doctor and scientifically qualified as a surgical nurse, she has the ability to channel spirit, to actually see people that have passed, and is incredibly intuitive and knowledgeable about the universe and about what's happening at the moment as a lot of people are waking up or trying to wake up. So Dr. Dolores is a bit of a special one. She's got her own fabulous podcast, The Dr. Dolores Show. She's a speaker, she's an author, and she's a critically acclaimed spiritual healer. So join me in welcoming Dr. Dolores Fazzino to WTF What's the Frequency? Dr. Dolores Fazzino, welcome to WTF What's the Frequency? It's so lovely to have you here.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. It's lovely to be here as well, too. And interesting times, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, such interesting times for all of us healers and for other people, I think, that are beginning to wake up. But before we get on to that, because that is a fascinating subject, I want to talk about you. Because you've been gifted since you were a child. And I want you to tell our viewers what that's like, because people hear about it, but they don't actually know.
Well, I always thought that everybody was like me, because there's things that were happening when I was a youngster that I thought were normal in my life, until I opened my mouth and started sharing some of these things with other people, and they look at me as if I was crazy lady, like, what are you talking about? And one example is this. I remember being in my parents' car in the back seat. We're driving down the freeway and there's another car, next to us. And next thing I knew, I was in the other car looking at myself. And, then I kind of, it was like I was bilocating, but being in like multiple places at the same time. And I thought everybody did that.
Wow, that's so exciting.
It's almost like shape-shifting until I started sharing that. And you have to remember, this is in the 60s, 1960s. So it's just like, they probably thought that my parents had fed me some acid or something like that. But that wasn't the case. It was just like, this was just me. And, I don't think my parents knew what to do with it either, but it was like being able to be in multiple places at the same time. And so,
me, sorry to interrupt, but your family, they don't have the gift, or people in the past? How
many of us in our family have people in our lineage that have the gift. I think that sometimes it skips generations, maybe, because my grandmother on my mom's side, she was very spiritual and very aware and awake, as we call it. And she was actually my first spiritual teacher. I just remember adoring my grandmother, and just my grandmother saw me for who I was, because we used to have interesting conversations when I just remember I would ask her about heaven and what's that all about. And, and we would just have interesting conversations. My mom's mom was probably a woman ahead of her time. She was probably born in the wrong time and place. Yet, she was one of my first spiritual teachers. And then on my dad's side of the family, his great-grandmother or his grandmother was a healer. And I really didn't find this out until, nobody really talked about this stuff until I was probably in my 20s. And my father said, yeah, when people weren't feeling well, they used to go visit my grandmother. And when they left, they felt better. I said, oh, she was a healer. So there you go.
It's
Yeah.
amazing, isn't it? And it's interesting that you say that, you had to be careful about it in the 60s. I have a great aunt who lives in the middle of the Australian bush
Mhm.
because she can't bear to be touched. The minute you touch her, she can see your future. And, there's been instances where she's given people warnings that have saved their children's lives. But instead of
Sure.
being grateful, they think she's some sort of witch.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with the closed mind people, you have to be incredibly careful. So is that what led you to becoming a nurse practitioner? Or is that your lovely cat?
That's my lovely cat. That's Gracie. She's now we'll talk that's another conversation, animals, because 'cause they're just all over energy. They just love energy. Um, wow. Well, what actually led me to become a nurse practitioner, is another story because I was actually on a pathway to become a concert clarinetist when I was a youngster, because of a lot of the circumstances that happened within my family structure. We weren't allowed to feel. And when you have somebody like myself who's an empath, intuitive, and highly sensitive person, we're just all about feeling. It's just like
So
we
where are
feel
you
things
from?
deeply. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, were you from a very stoic family? Because I mean, I'm British, so stiff upper lip HQ, show no reaction,
Well,
smile,
you
have a
know
cup of
what,
tea.
Vanessa, it's definitely part of that. My both my parents are first generation children of European immigrants. So, they had some really tough times, and a lot of people, immigrated, out of Europe for whatever reason, wars, famines, whatever was going on, a better life, to go someplace else. And, you know, I think it was probably culturally, one aspect of it, but you had the other aspect. uh, you don't wanna show the neighbors your weaknesses. That was another aspect, and plus, everybody was pretending that everything was perfect when in essence it wasn't. So, I think it's coping mechanisms. For my mom, she was a product of an alcoholic, household. So, her MO was she didn't wanna feel anything. So it was her MO was to ignore it, it'll go away. Well, you do a lifetime of that, and then guess what you start creating for yourself? A lot of health and wellness challenges.
It's very
And
interesting you say that, isn't
yeah,
it? Because
yeah.
people don't realize the health implications of negative energy, of being in a negative space, of being in the victim zone, of not moving forward, always being held back by the past, that it will impact your body and it will make you ill. I mean, people just don't seem to make the connection at all, do they?
No, they don't. And, what do we have to remember is things are just interconnected in ways people have no idea. And I'm privy to this because I'm also a medical intuitive. So I see like what's happening behind the scenes, and, in how things and situations and experiences have impacted a person. And a lot of times the person themselves are totally unaware of all of this. It's kind of happening. It's like the visual of an iceberg. You only see the tip of it, which is the physical, and underneath it is all the invisible part of the iceberg that you're not aware. And these are like your beliefs, your thoughts, your connectedness to yourself, whether or not you experience your emotions fully or not, whether or not you've been through your grieving process or not. It's like all that stuff kind of runs the show. So now that stuff is like moving the tip of that iceberg around without our awareness, you know?
Interesting, and very interesting you use that analogy because I was speaking to Gail and Gregory Haig, or
Mhm.
Hoig, the other day, who've been into spirit, sacred geometry for 40 years. And he was saying, Gregory was saying, and nobody ever shows more than 10% of who they actually are. So we've got this sort of grumbling mass hiding behind. And he said
Yeah.
it's very interesting that those of us that are awake are a lot more vulnerable. We're not we're not so governed by fear. We're not worried about showing our true selves.
Yeah. So circling back to, my childhood, you have somebody like myself who's an empath, intuitive, and highly sensitive person being told, ignore it, it'll go away. Guess what happens when you ignore something? It grows bigger. So it was growing bigger for me instead of going away. And I used to tell my mother, it's not going away, it's getting bigger. So for me, one of my coping mechanisms as a child was to channel my emotion into music. And so I really excelled at being a clarinetist. And in fact, what was happening in tandem in my childhood with that was my dad had thrown his back out in the mid 60s and had to have back surgery. And he picked up a hospital acquired infection during that hospitalization, which almost killed him at the time because they didn't have any of the medications or the technology that they currently have today to assist with that. So he was on his deathbed. I remember being in second grade and witnessing that. And my mom pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't until I got permission to go into the hospital and see him. And I was mortified. I didn't even recognize him. And I started bawling like a baby. And my dad started crying too. And I remember my mom saying, if you're going to cry, I'm not going to bring you back. Because
Oh, for goodness
she
sake.
couldn't handle it. But the
Yeah.
thing is then I realized, oh my God, this is more messed up than I realized at an age, because it's like I know things, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. My mom's hiding stuff. And so, with that in mind, I just channeled my energy. My dad did survive that. But what happened 4 years later, and it happened pretty much 4 times that it all started in 1970. Whenever his immune system would get compromised, this whole sequela would reappear, where he would get really deathly ill. He would develop abscesses throughout his abdominal cavity, have to have major surgery to lance them and clear those out, and then pretty much be in the hospital for 2 months to heal that. My childhood, and this not only happened once, it happened 4 times between 1970 and 1975. So my life was like this emotional roller coaster and not being able to feel. So what had happened, I'm going to flash forward to 1975. The last time this happened for my father, and my mom was at her wit's end because she didn't know. It was like Western medicine had failed her. So she started looking for alternative possibilities. In tandem, what they found was they put my father underneath the CAT scanner, which in 1975 was the first piece of modern technology that was introduced to Western medicine. And they were able to determine that where my dad's condition was originating was probably where he had his back surgery 10 years prior. So their solution was that he was going to have major back surgery called a spinal fusion. And in 1975, this too was in its neophyte stages of development that came with very high risks of being paralyzed. You could die, or maybe you'd get better. My mom
It's
was
really
like,
interesting you should say that
yeah,
because my sister had scoliosis in her spine. And in the late 70s, had to have her spine removed and a metal pole put in.
yeah,
And I remember being sat down and sort of them saying, there's 3 outcomes here. And, I can't remember how old I was because I tend to wipe horrible things out of my mind, but
yeah,
you just brought it back. I mean, people don't realize how advanced surgery is and what's capable now and what huge leaps have been
yeah,
made, do they? Because, I mean, it was, well, like you say, it was sort of, my sister had her operation. I think it
yeah.
was the 5th one done in the world.
Yeah, no, it's so in the 1970s, there was a lot of advancements and stuff, but it came with, a whole big, possibilities of high risks of not so good things happening. And of course, when my mom heard all those things, she was like, no, 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 no. And so she ended up of course, and then you have to also remember too, 1970s, we didn't have Google or MD, WebMD or anything like that. Everything was like through the news or, newspapers, and my mom, the rag of the day was the National Enquirer. It's like a lot of lay people got their educational stuff or got informed about things through that. I mean, I don't know if that was a good thing or bad thing, but that's what it was. This was the whole scenario. So my mom had come across an article that was in the National Enquirer that this minister from Cairo, Michigan, Dr. Reverend Alex Holmes, had the gift of healing, of laying on of hands, and he was being featured in an article in the National Enquirer because he assisted his brother in healing from leukemia, and this was in 1975. And Reverend Holmes had been doing this type of work for up to 25 years at that time, so he had been doing this work since the 1950s. So, of
Wow.
course, this was also considered quackery by modern medicine, okay, because they didn't understand that, this was all interconnected, okay? So, my dad, of course, was not a favor of this, but would only do it if the surgeon agreed. So, it just so happened that when my parents were discussing this, they were in the hospital, and of course my mom marches out to the nurse's station, and there's my dad's surgeon sitting at the nurse's station writing in the charts. And she said to him, "I'm thinking about having a spiritual healer come in." Doctor looked up at her, not missing a beat, and said, "Sure, that would be fine." So my mom went back to the room, shared that news with my father, and so my father agreed. And not 10 minutes went by, and my mom returns back to the nurse's station. The same surgeon, still sitting there, and she announced to the surgeon, "My husband agreed to have the spiritual healer come in." The surgeon dropped his pencil, looked up at her, and said, "What are you talking about? I never agreed to that." So this is where the
Wow.
universe starts setting up things in motion, okay? Of course, my mom didn't share that piece of information with my father, and a month later, Reverend Holmes was in our home in Connecticut. My mom flew him out from Cairo, Michigan. My two grandmothers were there, and my brother and two sisters, myself, and my parents. And so my father was sitting down. I don't know how Reverend Holmes knew this, because my dad had one leg that was shorter than the other, called a leg length discrepancy. He used to wear a lift in his shoes. My father's shoes were nowhere in sight. My dad was barefoot. Um, and so he said to my father, he said, "You have one leg that's shorter than the other." And my father said, "Yes." And he said, "Put both your feet up." And you could tell that there was a 1-inch gap between the longer and the shorter leg. And he said, "Put your feet down." And then he started praying over my father. He touched his belly, which is his solar plexus, and the top of his head, his crown chakra, and said some prayers. And then he, probably 3 minutes didn't go by. He said, "Now put both your feet up." And both his feet were the same length.
No way.
Yes
No
way.
way.
In that
Wow.
moment, my life changed forever. It was like my initiation into what I was what my gifts were and what I was supposed to be doing with my career. I changed my career path from being a concert clarinetist to go into healthcare, because I knew that it was my mission in this lifetime to bridge the physical with the spiritual and the invisible with the visible. My father, remember, he was a big skeptic, started wailing like a baby, like I've never ever seen him cry, because he needed to see some validation that something was actually happening. Because I believe
Amazing.
he probably lost his faith. So,
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because I went to church the other day to accompany my mother, um, and I just sat there and I thought, it feels like everybody is going through the motions, but most of you in here have lost your faith. You don't really believe that
yeah,
anything's going to get better.
yeah, no, it's so true. So more prayers were said over my father for the next half hour, and then he was instructed to go lie down, because as we know, when we do any major energy work or healing, it's almost like your whole body is getting recalibrated. It's like the analogy of the modern day computer getting an upload and an upgrade. It's like it has to go through its thing. You have to reboot it in order to make it more equilibrated to the higher frequency. Same thing with energy healing when people receive that. So my dad slept for over 24 hours. A month later, he went back to get a repeat CAT scan. They found no evidence of his condition. He never had to revisit that problem ever again in his life, and he never had to have the surgery. And he passed away about 12 years ago at the age of 80.
Oh my goodness, that is just the most incredible story. But it's not, I mean, you and I are used to hearing these things all the
Yeah.
time, aren't we? And it is incredible. So, you know, that happened with your father, and then you went into nursing because you knew
Yeah.
your purpose was to bridge the gap. Tell me how, I mean, when we've talked off camera, we talked about you being in a set, in theatre with surgeons and being able to see beyond what all the machines could see. Could you tell us about that? Because
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
fascinating.
So, I've been in healthcare over 45 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. And, I've witnessed a lot of things. Probably the last 37 years of that 45 years, I've been in the theater or the operating room, the surgical suites. And the last 30 years of that, I've been an assistant surgeon. What that means is that I help the attending surgeon do the operation. I have credentials and education to do that. And so I have assisted on well over 20,000 surgeries in the past um, 30 years of all different modalities, from back surgeries to hips to abdominal surgeries to neurosurgery to open heart. I've done it all. Robotic stuff. I still do that as part of my practice because I'm there for a bigger reason. I'm there to assist with the quantum field of a lot of different people and a lot of different organizations, because as we kind of maneuver through major changes, I work in that realm. And some people know it, some people don't. I don't advertise that, but that's what happens, and that's why I'm there, for that purpose. Because what I witness as a medical intuitive is like, I see the people who are in their physicality. There might be 10 people, physical bodies that you could see in the room, but there's a cast of thousands in every room
Oh,
of
wow.
spiritual helpers and medical teams in the etheric that are assisting with what is going on. That's what happens behind the
Sorry,
scenes.
just to ask you a question. So you've got all these helpers
Yeah.
from all the different realms. That's incredible. What is it? Is there ever a case where people don't have anybody helping them, and the message is this is the end of their contract in the 3D realm?
Well, I'm going to offer you a different perspective on that. Even though it's their end of their contract, they're still there assisting, because maybe they need to have something in the etheric that's going to assist them in their transition for a smoother transition.
Oh, interesting. No, I just
Yeah.
hate to think
Yeah.
that somebody was there without any help, that if that was your
No,
time, it
no.
was like
That has
nothing
never
ever.
been the case. That has never been the case that I've witnessed. What's interesting is that I had a huge validation of that just recently this year. One of my family members, my Aunt Gladys, was the last sister of my mom's generation, because my mom also had passed away about 10 years ago. And Aunt Gladys is close to 90 and very spry and very with it. And she was like my favorite auntie on both sides of my family. And I would talk to her on a pretty regular basis, even into adulthood, because her and I were pretty close. And when I ended up getting a text one morning at 7 o'clock when I was in the hospital from my sister saying that Auntie Gladys passed away. And I heard her voice in my ear. She said, "Now I get to really see what you do for a living." And I just started chuckling because I was like, yes, she could see me. And and so she brought her husband, who had passed away 15 years before. And of course, my parents, who passed away 10 and 12 years prior. The four of them were in the operating suite with me that day. And so they got to see what I did behind the scenes.
Oh, wow, that's incredible, isn't it? And I think
Yeah.
really for anyone that's lost anybody recently, I have several clients that have come to me recently. They've lost their husbands of, 50 years, 60 years. And, it's a great consolation to them when I say to them, but they're still here, they're still around you.
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
They're always there to help you, and stop thinking of it as being an ending. They're just in a different dimension. What how
Totally.
would you describe that?
I feel that, when people transition, they lose their physical body. It's like an energetic upgrade. It's like there's different dimensions. When we drop our physical body, it's like we're ascending to higher dimensions because we're energy. When we are in our physical body, we're either in third, fourth, or fifth dimension, and that moves, we kind of are fluid and moving through multiple dimensions at the same time. Because one classic example is, if you live by yourself, which I do, so it's like if I leave my keys on the counter, I turn around and they're not there, and I turn around again and they're there. That's an example of moving through dimensions. Okay.
Do you know, I used to have that. I lived in a house in Nottingham,
Yep.
and I always felt that there was a child there, and it almost felt like if I didn't acknowledge it, if I was really busy for the day, I would hide my keys or my gloves, and I'd put them on the table, gloves and keys together, and I'd turn around to pick up a briefcase or something. I'd turn around, they wouldn't be there,
I
and
know.
I'd think, I mean, what's going on when that
Yeah.
happens? Because it happens to a lot of friends of mine as well.
No, and that's I feel that even that's what happens. It's like we're, moving through dimensions. It's like I think we're fluid and we don't stay in one dimension. We kind of move through probably several back and forth depending on what's going on with us. So taking that a step further, when a person transitions, they drop that physical denseness. They're just vibrating in a higher frequency. They're very much around you. However, when you're vibrating at higher frequencies, it's like your body no longer exists. And I think, when we are able to go into meditation and go into like dimensions that are above like sixth and seventh into like 12th and above, it's like this essence of being totally present and aware, but your body is nowhere in sight. As weird as that is, your physicality is nowhere in sight.
No, I totally get that. It's like a lightness, isn't it? Like a
Yeah.
real sort of floating light. It's more than floating. It's such a level of lightness. It's like I always feel like I've been absorbed into the atmosphere, that I'm
Oh,
just part of
absolutely.
everything.
I totally agree. And, it's, to me, I find it very comforting because, um, when people understand that and are able to incorporate that, it's like it's like a game changer for them, because it brings them so much more peace and serenity that you're not alone. You're never alone. The illusion is we think we are alone. We're not. We're never alone. Um, you know, there's more help for us than people can realize. And one thing I need to really drive home is that how often we forget to ask, because we're sovereign beings, we're here of our free will. They cannot interfere unless we ask, but we forget to ask
Oh, we forget to ask all the time. All
all
the
the
time.
time.
It's
You know,
unbelievable.
yeah,
And
and
people say to you, "Oh, I'm so desperate, blah, blah, blah." Yeah, but have you asked? Have you been grateful and have you asked? And it's, what do you mean ask? And it's like, just ask. Ask for what you want. And
well,
it sounds so simple, doesn't it?
not only that too, but the asking part and allowing yourself to receive, these are worthiness issues that a lot of times, and I want to say it's like the hidden unworthiness that we all hide within ourselves because, for whatever reason, the guilt, shame, or whatever we've been exposed to throughout our this lifetime, but in previous lifetimes as well, also plays into this.
And it creates your future. So you're a distinguished pioneer in this field. We were talking before about bringing these things to the fore, trying to talk about them in the 1960s. I mean, I've tried to talk about them in the 1980s and got shut down. So, you know, well, brave, brave soul you. And even now I go to dinner parties and, get a little bit of, what do I call it? Polite abuse, when they go, You'll have to convince me of that. A
You're
healer, you
so
say?
you're so British.
Yeah, I mean, people say, "Oh, a healer. Very
Yeah.
interesting," and then move away from you, very quickly. I don't know what
Yeah.
they think that we're gonna do, plug into them and their deepest secrets. But, yeah, I mean, moving on from what we were talking about before, which has been fascinating, I want you we've talked a lot about what's going on at the moment
Yeah.
because more and more people are searching out healers and teachers, and there seems to be a desire for change. And
Yeah.
it's not religion. People know that there's something more and they want to tap into it. What's going on?
Well, this is interesting because I feel like, um, you know, everything happens for a reason. I'm convinced of that. The whole COVID thing and the pandemic thing, there's a reason for everything. And, every situation is a possibility for us to take a deeper dive into exploring who we are and uncovering our true essence of what we are at a soul level. Because when we're born, we're pure essences and we get exposed to so much stuff, in our family of origin or how we came into the world, and we get programmed. The essence of a soul coming in is so pure, and it's pure love. Yet when we're exposed to everything, we take things on an unconscious level and get absorbed into our beingness, and these create filters for us. That's my belief in a simplified manner, that we look and observe life through these lenses that may not even be our own. They might be imposed upon us by our family of origin or our culture or anything else that we're exposed to. And I think we see a lot of that today with, you know, a lot of the unrest and chaos that we experience in our outer world, the wars and the unfortunate tragedies that we witness. And when there's so much unresolved and fear in the world, and we take that on, we focus on that, it seems like, and we create more and more of that.
Well, I couldn't agree more because I was talking to somebody about this the other day because there's a lot of things going on at the moment that are causing people to divide and separate.
Yeah.
And I went to the pub and everybody was ranting about, um, Israel and Palestine. And I said, I'm not buying into any of it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like any form of violence or any unnecessary killing, but I am not going to perpetuate with words of hatred and anger, the hatred and anger that's already there. And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, energetically, if you engage with it from this point of view,
Yeah.
you're just feeding the beast.
Yes, you are.
I'm sending love to everybody that's hurt and suffering in that
Yep.
space, regardless of their beliefs, because we're all connected and we're all human. I'm just sending love, hope, and healing because
Yep.
it's just about humanity.
And
Oh, just that again.
here comes Gracie once again. Gracie, I love you. Yes, you're so cute. She wants
And
to be
thank
part
you
of the
for agreeing.
conversation, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and if I couldn't agree with you more as well, because what is really interesting is that everybody's being triggered right now. Okay. If you look at it, and it's like when we get triggered, it's like we kind of have a choice of going into automatic and reacting the way we've always done things, or we have a choice to do it differently and experience something differently. This kind of taps on something that I've been experiencing lately. That whole situation in the Middle East really struck a chord with me on such a deep level that, I feel like there was so much grief from another time and place that was lodged within me that needed to come through to be healed. So I'm going to invite people, when something like as tragic as that event, is like, and it's affecting you, it's triggering you, it's capturing, it's activating something within inside of you. And our natural tendency is to react and to, I invite people just to just sit with what they're feeling and just see if they could go deeper within themselves and heal that, because I feel that every one of us is part of that collective consciousness. And when we're able to go within and be with what we're experiencing and just love and appreciate and observe what's happening with that instead of coming from a place of react, you could come from a place of love instead of fear, and you're starting to pour that into collective consciousness. And as we know, each one of us is a drop of water in that big ocean of collective consciousness. Whenever a drop of water goes into a body of water, it ripples out. That's the greatest visual you could see. So it's impacting everything. And, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a positive thing or a negative thing, it still adds to that pot. So what are you choosing to add to that collective conscious pot? You know?
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's the check-in, isn't it? You know, I
yeah,
had Ebony Tutora come on, who's a manifestation queen, an expert, and she said we are so unaware of our language. We are not, what's the word? Exquisite with our words, and we casually cast, you know, the future without even thinking about it by the energetic statements that we make, and
absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
made me really aware of what comes out of my mouth, because I am a bit of a sort of like blabbermouth, you know, I'm just on
You
run,
know,
let it run.
we all are. And it's just like, it's just a reminder to be more aware and mindful. When you're aware, it's like, and I also think that what's happening too, in tandem to this, it's like historic things happen within, you know, our lifetime. And I think those things happen, you know, sometimes I think that sometimes they're meant to happen. And I'll tell you why, because it's like it allows humanity to wake up. Okay. It's like, I think we have a sector of a population that are awake and aware, people who are waking up, and still people who are sleeping. And I think
I
every
couldn't
time
agree
we have,
more.
yeah, every time there's a catastrophic event, I think it's the opportunity for more and more people to awaken. And so, you know, once people are awakened, it's hard to go back to sleep. Okay. It's like, but now what do I do with it? You know, that's the question. It's like, okay, there's no reference point for this person. It's like you're starting your spiritual explorative journey of who you really are. And, you know, it's like the renaissance of coming back to self.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know I was just interviewing somebody else earlier today, and they went from being, you know, working on Wall Street to becoming a healer, and it was like, how on what did people say to you? And they said, oh, the same as they said to you, V. You know, you're absolutely insane. You know, do you think you need to go and see a therapist? And but there's more and more people taking this great leap and saying, I'm not buying into corporate anymore. I don't
Yeah.
want to work 14 hours a day. There's a greater purpose. And I feel it's like the earth is calling us, all of us hypersensitive people. It's like, now's the time.
Yep.
You've got to switch on, because nothing you can see, nothing in the construct that exists politically, economically, or even environmentally is going to save you. Only
Correct.
you can do it from within
Absolutely.
yourselves.
That is, you are spot on with that, Eva, because it's like, you know, it's all about returning to self. So often we have given our power away to something outside of ourselves. And a lot of times we've given our power away on an unconscious level. It's still giving it away, but you're not aware of it. Now you're aware and awake and how you're doing it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know,
Mhm.
for years you mentioned, I can't remember the name of it, but we have like the Daily Mail. It's like a comic newspaper, but
Uh-huh.
you know, the readership is immense, and that's what educates them, a huge proportion of the public. And it's like the asleep news, you know, stay asleep, everything's okay, minimal news reporting, massive zodiac competitions, cartoons, you know?
Yep.
keep everybody asleep. But
Yep.
now I'm finding that a lot of people from all walks of life are coming to me and saying, I want to know more. Where do I find out more?
Yeah.
How can I connect with this? Because it feels better than
Yeah.
what I was connected with earlier. You know,
Well,
you having a sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say you're having similar experiences, and if you are, what advice are you giving people?
Well, I always tell people, you have the answers within yourself. It's about learning how to trust that, trusting your intuition, because once you trust your intuition, you just know what you know, what you know. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's just like you know, without a doubt, and you're so spot on with things, you just know what you know. I can't describe it any other way.
I can, because this week, well, all last week, I've no plans to go anywhere hot at the moment. I'm staying in the UK doing Christmas here. You know, my mum's quite old, might not have another one. So, you know, plans to stay here, getting my jumpers out, loads of scarves and gloves. Anyway, for a week, I kept waking up, get your linen trousers put up. So I bought some linen trousers in the sale, you know, and they're like about this much too long. Every morning, get your linen trousers turned up. I was like, what on earth for? Anyway, I then have a phone call at the weekend, and I'm probably going to have to go to Arizona where it's baking hot and I'll be
Yeah.
able to wear my linen trousers. And it was like, oh, now I've got to rush and find somebody that can put them up. If only I'd really listened to that and
Yeah.
just done it and trusted it,
Yeah.
I'd be sorted and I could be packed. But now I've got to run around and see if I can find someone who's got time to do it for me. You know, peak holiday season when they're adjusting everybody's beautiful cocktail dresses and ball gowns. So I'm gonna have to take a box of chocolates with me. I think bribery always works.
Bribing is, yes. People are food driven, and the sweeter the better.
Absolutely, absolutely. So everyone's waking up, and we healers are being upgraded, aren't we, at the moment, which is really weird. We were talking about, I mean, I've
Yeah.
had ringing in my ears now, I think it's for nearly a year, and it's at different frequencies at different points of the day. Sometimes it's very loud, sometimes it's you can hardly hear it at all. But
Uh-huh.
it's been there for ages. And I hear that everybody's getting this, that's, you know, has a gift or is able to do healing. What are you experiencing?
Gosh, for me, it seems like I go through these ebb and flows of getting a lot of energetic downloads and then just having to sleep to process it, or sometimes just feeling like it's like when I go to sleep, I go someplace else and I'm getting like all these downloads, or doing different work on a different plane. Yeah, energetically, it's kind of interesting because I like to sleep because to me, I just process things a lot better, especially if I'm just overwhelmed with something, because energetically, I think I take on a lot. And sometimes it's a little more than what I, would like. And so, of course, there's ways that I work with that. And I just remind the people on the other side, it's like, hey, you got to slow it down a little bit. This body can only take so much. So
Yeah,
it's
I
a,
know.
it's a,
And also, I've been saying, you know, what's going on? You know, can I have some
yeah,
answers, please, or just a bit of direction? But just for our audience who are watching, who don't understand what downloads are, could you explain that to them?
sure. So, it's like we get activations, downloads, I call them activations. And it's light energy basically. And what it is, it's higher vibrating frequency. So, like I was explaining earlier, when we get activated, it's just like our body's like a computer. We are, as a computer's getting an upgraded program so it could run more effectively. It gets downloaded into the computer. You need to reboot the computer to start it so the computer uh, a, calibrates to that higher or newer program. Same thing with our human bodies. Energetically, we're getting an upgrade. Our physical body is vibrating here. Maybe the upgrade's a little higher. So it's like our physical body needs to raise its frequency to match that pretty much. So that's what the activation is. It's raising the current status of our physical body. So for some people, it's like you're getting downloaded. It's just like, and it, it seems like maybe things are chaotic in your world, or maybe things feel like they're sped up. It's like you feel like you can't keep up with what's going on. That's an indicator that you probably have just gotten a download or upgrade. And what you probably need to do is probably sit with that and just be and allow it to do what it needs to do. If you can take a nap, sometimes that's enough to allow your body to rest enough so it can incorporate that new energy into your system. The goal here, Eva, is to listen to your body. Okay. If it's hungry, feed it. If it's thirsty, water it. If you feel like you need to be out in nature, go and do that, because grounding in nature sometimes will help this. If you are tired and you feel like you need to take a nap, give yourself permission to do that, because we've been programmed in our society that if you're not doing anything, you're considered lazy and non-productive. And I'm going to call
Oh my
BS.
goodness.
I'm going to call,
This just comes up all
yeah,
the time from
yeah,
everybody that comes on the show, that they are actually now much more productive because
yeah,
they're slowing down,
yeah.
and
And, and,
allowing
and so the thing
other
is,
forces
yeah,
outside of our physicality to bring things in.
no,
That's what I'm finding.
no, but it's so true, because our society, we've been programmed, to think that if you're not in the doing mode, you're not being a productive member of society. And that's the illusion that, people need to realize that that's not the truth. Because, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes when you're able to take those breaks and rest, you accomplish way more than you could have if you tried to trudge your way through something and make something happen, because you're not in alignment. It's learning how to be in the flow of the body and the energy, and being able to maneuver through life instead of trying to force something to happen, push a boulder up a hill, and try to create from that aspect.
Yeah, it's like you can't create from difficulty. So
Mhm.
I've been trying to get a project off the ground recently, and met some amazing people, and they've come forward, but for whatever reason, it hasn't felt right.
Yeah,
And some of them have had, amazing offerings to bring to the table, but deep down, or when I put my hand on my heart, it was like, it doesn't feel right. It's not calibrating.
yeah,
It's just not the right frequency. And in guessing, and people have said, "The hell, you're absolutely crazy. You can't turn that down." It's like, it doesn't feel right. It won't work out well. The minute I've turned them down, literally something better has turned up. Might not be
absolutely.
a minute, might be a week,
No,
but at incredible speed, something twice as good, 10
yep.
times more genuine, with far more integrity that's come to the fore. And it's like, gosh, if I hadn't turned that down, I could be caught up in a nightmare?
Absolutely. This is where it's important to trust your instincts. I think so often people see the dangling carrots outside of themselves and they're lured in. And I think there's that discernment piece that is so incredibly important that people have not either developed, or they ignore that.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's back to that lack of faith again, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
like, if we know that the universe only wants us to succeed, if we know that we only have to ask, if we know that everything we need is there, and we're taught this in lots of different ways, or we're given that messaging, but the counter messaging is, oh, that only happens to other people. It doesn't happen to people like me. I come from here. That never happens in my neighborhood. And we allow that to create the future instead of imagining past those restrictions. And that's what I really want to get over as a message to people. We've had amazing people come on this show, as well as your fabulous self, who were on the street and ended up having a stratospheric climb. It's like, well, what did you do? And it was like, I always imagined being there. I didn't worry about how to get there. I
Yeah.
just imagined being a media mogul from 12 years old. It was like, really? Yeah. I used to walk around school thinking I'm a media mogul. And then guess what? Was really young. So, you know, it's great to hear you say that. And sadly, we're coming to the end of our time together. It feels like 5 minutes. Talk about, you know, quantum time and space. But if you had top tips for people watching this to that they could take on board today and see a difference really quickly, what would they be?
I would say the first thing that's really coming to mind is don't ever stop dreaming. Because I feel when you stop dreaming, you've given up. Keep dreaming
Yeah.
no matter what is.
And just as you said, you've given up. Dreaming felt like really light energy. And then as you said, given up, it almost felt like it closed the
Yep,
opportunity, you know?
exactly.
Just in those words.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So, I'd say keep dreaming no matter what is going on, and always trust your instincts because they're 100% spot on. And when in doubt, trust your instincts. And when you're in doubt, trust your instincts. And when you're in doubt, trust your instincts. They're never wrong.
Yeah, yeah, everybody, you heard it here. And Dr. Dolores, where can we find you? Because you are the author of so many, amazing books. I know that you're a public speaker. Where can we come and see you, buy your stuff? Where are you?
Well, I am also a TV, radio, and podcast host with the Inspired Choices Network. And my show is called The Dr. Dolores Show, where we talk about healing in ways you never thought possible, and also where we bridge the physical with the spiritual and the invisible with the visible. Um, I also have a website. It's drdoloresfazzino.com. And on that website, there's a free video guided meditation to keep you grounded in the present moment. Because if there's a lot of people out there that have that, I call that monkey brain, or the squirrel brain, where everything's like chattering around and it's hard for them to stop that chatter and be grounded in the present moment. This brief 7-minute guided meditation assists them with that. And so you'll have a different flavor of what it's like to be anchored in your body versus being in your head.
Oh, that sounds absolutely beautiful and amazing first step for anybody who's thinking or has started to awaken, really. So, what an amazing conversation we've had. I could talk to you all day, but sadly, our time's come to an end. Dr. Dolores Fazzino, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're so welcome, Eva, and it was an immense pleasure to be here. Thank you for the
Oh,
opportunity.
it's my pleasure. And to all our lovely listeners and subscribers, thank you for joining us yet again. And don't forget, I'll be here next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, on the Limelight Network on E360 TV. Love and light to you all. See you soon.